Thank you, Shelley. And Jill, where are you? Thank you so much. My goodness. Jill's kind of filling in the last minute. Let's show our appreciation. Praise God for the music this morning. Shelley, would you put up the slide on 50 stories? This is something that we're doing here. And by the way, welcome to you folks who are online. We're glad that you're here and spending time with us and worshiping with us today. This is something I'm encouraging everyone to do for the Lenten season is grab these 50 stories. They're online. You don't have to memorize them. You just go to our website. You'll see them there. And read a story a day. And even if you think you know the stories, read them again because, you see something new. Case in point, I was working on the sermon for today and the lesson that Shelley just read. And one of my favorite authors has like 2 or 3 articles up there, written at different times. And so I read the newest one first. And, he said, and actually I didn't even see the other one at first. And so he at the end of the article, he said, it's amazing what happens when you read these stories over and over again, because I saw things that I'd never seen before. And if you want proof of that, go ahead and look at my previous article from a couple of years ago. And he's absolutely right. The first article was like completely traditional in terms of what the story of the stilling of the seas is and Peter walking on the water. And this other one was in a completely different direction. This is a guy who knows his Bible inside and out. He spent a lifetime studying it. I encourage you guys to do the same thing. Read those stories. Because not only are they the story of salvation, and not only are they the stories that are so life-giving, but they are stories, they're like, as I told a parishioner of mine, it's like having a diamond that you're holding. And you keep turning the diamond, and you see new facets that shine. And you see things in the diamond that you'd never seen before. And that's what these stories are like. So, it has been an interesting week for me, I will tell you that. Monday was the first anniversary of my mom's death. And so I went over to Sioux City, I spent it with Dad, and by the way, I don't know if you all know this or not, but then Tuesday is my dad's birthday. And Mom died, quite literally, 20 minutes before Dad's 90th birthday last year. So Dad was 91, we spent Monday almost all day together, and Tuesday morning until I had to come back and get back to work. And, I've been thinking a lot about Mom ever since. And the thing I keep thinking about probably isn't the greatest thing in the world to think about, but I think about the way she was so anxious all the time. This woman was the queen of anxiety. And it came out in all sorts of ways, but especially when we were traveling, when we were in the car. So we would be in the car, and she'd be in the back seat, and I'd be driving, and you could feel it. She had her hand on the headrest in front of her, grabbing it, I'm sure just leaving marks. And then I would pass someone, and you would hear this from the back seat. You'd hear... And I also know that she loved to put the brake on, even though she was in the back seat. So she would put that foot down so hard, you'd think almost that she'd go right through the floorboard. And it wasn't just that. She'd stand up in the picture window when I'd leave. And there was always a truck that parked across the street. And she's standing there in the picture window doing this. I know the truck's there. It's always there. But she had to make sure that I was not going to hit that truck on the way out. In fact, the truck's here. I always back this way. How could you hit it? She was worried about it. And it wasn't just that. It was everything. She was worried about safety. She was worried about people getting hurt. She was worried about herself getting hurt. She was afraid a lot of the time. Covered it up pretty well most of the time, except around us. But it was there. And you know something? Here's the thing. We all could tell her, Mom, don't worry. Just take it easy. Don't do that. Don't be so anxious. Everything's going to be okay. And she knew that. She knew she shouldn't worry. But could she help herself? Not a chance. There was no way she could not worry. And in fact, me telling her not to worry made her worry more because she worried about the fact that she wasn't supposed to worry. Isn't that interesting? I tell you that story not to poke fun at her, but because I think we're all that way in some way, shape, or form. I mean, some of us handle it better than others. Some of us hide it better than others. But anxiety is there for every one of us, I think, in some way. And it starts when you're very young. It's just our culture. It's the way we are. So think about it. Very young, you go to school. And what are you supposed to do? Get good grades. So you've got that pressure on you to get good grades. And it starts like in kindergarten, If your kid isn't reading by kindergarten, your parents are worried that maybe there's something wrong. I didn't read when I was in kindergarten. I could barely read when I was in first grade. But right now, the way things are, if you are behind if you're not reading in kindergarten. So parents put the pressure on the kids, and the kids feel the pressure. Okay? And then you get into this, really for the first time, this social situation where there are other people around, and you want to fit in. You start worrying about that too. You start putting that pressure on you. See, it's pressure, and then the pressure makes worry. And so you got to wear the right clothes. You got to hang around with the right people. You got to do all the right things and say all the right things. Otherwise, you're not going to fit in. You're going to look silly. You're not going to belong. All right? And then you grow up, and you'd think it'd go away, but it doesn't. Because you get through college, more grades, right? More fitting in. You try to find a spouse, maybe. More trying to fit in, wondering if you're good enough for anybody. And then you get out in the working world, and what do you have to do? You got to land a job that's going to make you some good money. More pressure. You go buy a house. Now you got financial responsibilities. Maybe you've started a family. Now you've brought lives into the world. And yeah, you're responsible for them. More pressure. One thing after the next, after the next. Somebody, either you or somebody in your family, pulls up with a health crisis. It happens all the time. And it happens to everyone. We all have these scares. And some of them, as some of you know, are not just scares. They're the real deal. And it doesn't matter if it's the real deal or if it's a scare. If it comes to you, you know where it's going, folks. And you know what it's going to do to you. More pressure, more worry. All the while, you're still trying to fit in, trying to wear the right clothes, trying to hang with the right people so that you are acceptable. It's there literally till the day you die. Right? I mean, I'm in that age room now. Do I have enough money for retirement? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Have I spent too much? I worry about that. It's sort of like, I heard this comparison, it's sort of like water behind a dam. So you have the dam there, right? And the water level goes up and up and up. And the more water that's back there, the more pressure there is on the dam until it gets so full. And the thing about it is, if the water pressure behind the dam is just 1 pound of pressure underneath what the dam can take, you go around and you take a look, and that dam looks perfect. 1 pound over, it's a catastrophe. And we all know it. Nobody can see it. Nobody knows it except you. You know your dam. You know where the pressure is. You can feel the water rising. And it looks good, but when it breaks, oh my. And I think we all experience this in some way, shape, or form. Like I said, some handle it better than others, but it's there for every one of us, isn't it? And, 1 in 3 of us sitting here, 1, 2, 3, one of you is going to have an anxiety disorder so profound sometime in your life that it just disables you for that time. 1 in 3. And like my mom, everyone can tell you, don't worry. Don't be anxious. Everything's going to be okay. You can know that you're not supposed to worry, that everything's going to be okay. But it doesn't change things. You can't help yourself because that's life. And that's who we are. So let's pause for a section, and if you'd please sing for us. Sing.
Jesus, keep me near the cross, there a precious fountain, free to all the healing stream, flows from Calvary's mountain. In the cross, be my glory ever, till my ransomed soul shall find rest beyond the river.
Okay, I didn't help Joe pick those songs, but isn't that perfect for what we're talking about today? My goodness, God works in such great ways. We're in this sermon series called Through the Wilderness. There's the graphic for it. It's our Lenten sermon series, and it's about taking daily life as though we are walking through the wilderness. And you know some of those stories, right? The story of Moses and God's people walking through the wilderness and learning to trust God along the way. And I really think that when we're in Lent, that's such an appropriate topic to be taking on. And so the lesson that Shelley read for you today, good place to begin when we start talking about anxiety. And you know, I want to rewind a little bit, because it's in the 14th chapter, it starts in verse 22, where Shelley was reading. But really you need to read the entire 14th chapter. Please go back and do that. Because the entire chapter is really, it's 3 different stories. And you know how we like to just say, well, there's the story, we're done with it? No. You got to read all 3 stories, because there's just some really interesting things going on. It starts, beginning of chapter 14, with the beheading of John the Baptist. John the Baptist is Jesus' cousin, and he is brutally murdered by the Emperor Herod because of his wife and his stepdaughter, who are bloodthirsty and they want revenge. And he's just murdered for no reason. Well, guess what? Amongst Jesus' followers, and amongst just the people who are around Jesus, even if they're not followers, the anxiety level goes up. So much so that Jesus says, we've got to get away. Okay, so they get in the boat. They've been with people all along. He's been healing people. He's been talking to people. He's been teaching them. They get in the boat. They go across the lake to the other side just to retreat for a while. This is a kidney punch. And then, but then people find out where he's going, and they run around the lake to the other side, and they tell others, and people in cities and town all around the lake, they all gather, so that when Jesus gets to the other side of the lake, there's the crowd already there waiting for him. And I know, at least for myself, when I've always read that passage, apart from its context, I always thought, well, it's just that Jesus is famous and people want to be healed. But you read it in context, and it's really about a lot of people who are facing some pretty terrible things. One of their religious leaders, John the Baptist, has been brutally murdered by a tyrant. And it raises those levels of anxiety in them. And it says that Jesus has compassion on them. Okay, want more worry? You getting tired of worry? There's plenty more in chapter 14. So they're there, and Jesus has been healing them, but it's getting late in the day. I think you know this story. And the disciples are worried because, all these people, how in the world are we going to feed them, Jesus? I tell you what, just send them away, send them to town, because we can't take care of them. They're going to have to feed themselves. And Jesus says, no, that's not necessary. You feed them. More worry. How are we going to do that? Between all of us here, we have 5 loaves and 2 fish. And Jesus, bring them to me. Sets the crowd down. You know the story. Breaks the bread, blesses the fish, passes them out. Everybody eats to the full. 5,000 families Okay, it's not just 5,000 people. It says in the Bible, it says 5,000 men, which means that they brought the women and children with them. 5,000 families are fed. And they're out in the wilderness. Okay? That's where Jesus is. Sounds a lot like Moses, doesn't it? They're being fed, manna in the wilderness. Jesus is there. He feeds them. 5 loaves, 2 fish. And then when it's all over, 12 baskets full. In case the disciples were worried that they weren't going to get to eat. 1 for each of them. Now we come to today's story. Jesus tells the disciples, I don't want you here. Get in the boat. Go across the sea while I say goodbye to the crowd. So, he's in the back of the church shaking hands, and they take off in the boat. And that night, and then he goes up to the mountain to pray, to be alone by himself for a little while. But he sent the disciples out on the sea. And that night, they're on the sea, and the wind picks up, and the waves picked up. And they are doing everything within their power. Experienced sailors, but this is not fun. Everything in their power just to keep the boat afloat. And there's no Jesus anywhere. They're by themselves out there. Until very early in the morning, sometime between 3 and 6 in the morning, here comes Jesus walking across the water. Shelley, would you put up the next slide, please? And I'd like you to, you got her there? There we go. Read it with me. This is interesting. When the disciples, read it with me, when the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. In their fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost!" But Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage. I am here." Okay, I want you to notice something. It's a ghost. Not that one yet, Shelley. Go back. It's a ghost. The Greek word is phantom. That's fun fact. I just like that sort of stuff. I like to know where words come from. But then Jesus speaks to them. He tells them what I want to tell my mom. Don't worry. Okay? And so he says, take courage, and then be not afraid. You all know what that is in Greek? Me phobiesta. We've been talking about that a lot. Don't be afraid. And it's a command. Don't be afraid. And then it says, I am here, except the word, the phrase is not I am here, it's just I am. Anybody know where that comes from? That comes from Exodus. That's the name of God. Ego eimi in Greek. I am. I am God. Don't be afraid. I've got this covered. Take courage. You're on the sea. I sent you out there. I want you to be there. And I know you're going to face these waves, but I've got you. And so up to this point, let's just be clear about what Jesus has done. Jesus has been Dave telling Mom not to worry. And they're good words, to be sure. But nonetheless, that's what's happening. So one of the disciples that are in the boat, they get it. He gets it. His name is Peter. You all know the story. I'm just going to retell it anyway. His name is Peter, and he's pretty excited. He's jazzed that Jesus is on the water, and he recognizes him, and he hears those words, don't be afraid. He says, take courage. And he I am. Oh, this is God. Okay. And so Peter says, you know what, God? I'm going to leave the safety of the boat. If it's okay with you, if you say I can do it, I'm going to get out and walk on the water to you. And Jesus says, commands him, come. Well, you know what happens. He gets out. He sees the wind. He sees the waves. And he is just filled with fear. Next slide, Shelley. Read it with me. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. Save me, Lord, he shouted. Sozo me, save me. And that's a command. It's not a request. I'm in trouble, God. Save me, Jesus. Now, if you've read this story enough times like I have, probably at this point what you're thinking is, if Peter would just have stayed focused on Jesus rather than looking at those waves, he'd have been okay. And I cannot tell you, and you've heard this, you've maybe thought this yourself, but you've not only thought it yourself, but you've heard it from preachers. I've preached that myself. I was not a good preacher the day I preached that. I'll tell you that right now. The sermon is really simple. I could do it for you in a heartbeat. It's, stay focused on Jesus. Keep your eyes on Jesus. It's going to get tough. It's going to get hard. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Don't be like Peter. Just stay focused on the one who'll keep you afloat. Keep your eyes there. Sounds like a good advice, doesn't it? Except, here's the thing. Jesus could tell Peter that. We can think that about Peter. We can preach that. We can believe it about ourselves. But in the end, we're a lot like Mom. I could tell you till the cows come home. She can know that she's supposed to not be afraid, to not be anxious. But there's the wind, there's the waves, and there is nothing she can do. And Peter can't do it either. That's the point here. Should he have kept his eyes on Jesus? Absolutely he should have. But the point is that he didn't because he couldn't. And just simply to say, keep your eyes on Jesus, Peter knows that. He knows what he should have done. He can't. He can't help himself. Because that's the nature of who we are. That's our life together. Now, at this point, this is where the sermon gets really interesting. The lesson, maybe not the sermon, but the lesson gets really interesting. I worry about that too. Is it interesting? I have lots of things to worry about. This is where the lesson gets really interesting. Because, Shelley, next slide. Read it with me. Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. See, this isn't on Peter. This isn't Peter thinking the right thing or having the right mindset. This is Jesus who saves Peter precisely because Peter can't do it himself. I think so often we have this idea that our Christian faith is a self-help thing and that Jesus is some kind of life coach. And he's got lots of good information for us. He's got lots of good ways he can coach us, but that's not his job. He's not a life coach, he's a savior. And he comes to you where you can't do things yourself. It is just that simple, my friends. See, the wind and waves are going to be there no matter what. Did you notice? Wind and waves don't stop till they get in the boat, till after it's all done. Jesus tells the disciples, don't be afraid. Okay? Take courage. I am. He tells them, he doesn't leave hints. These are like crazy, obvious. I am. Well, that's God, right? We got God in our midst. How could we possibly go wrong? The wind and waves don't stop. They will always be there. No matter what. But what we do here, what we talk about here, is not the self-help stuff. And not the encouraging things that you already know. Yeah, don't be afraid. No. What we talk about here is a God who comes to us, who saves us because we can't save ourselves, who grabs us when we are in trouble, when we are afraid, when we are lost, and when we are alone. That's what this is about. And if you get nothing else from this message, know this. The anxiety will come. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in the last section. The anxiety will come. It won't stay away because it's part of who we are. But that's where you get to know Jesus best. Because he will not just walk with you. He will not just tell you what to do. He will do it for you. He will grab you. He will pull you up. and he will save you. Let's sing.
Near the cross, a trembling soul, love and mercy found me. There the bright and morning star shed his beams around me. In the cross, be my glory ever, till my ransomed soul shall find rest beyond the river.
How are you? How's your dam doing? Feeling the pressure? Everyday life? Is it there? Does it create anxiety for you? I'd love to be able to tell you, don't be afraid, don't worry. It'll be okay. It will be okay. I can tell you that. I believe that. I know it'll be okay. But I'm not going to just tell you that. I'm going to point you to a God who wants you to step out on the waves and who will let you know that as you do, he's going to pick you up. He's going to grab you. He's going to keep you safe. Because he wants you to live life to the fullest. So another story about my mom, and I think I've told the story here. I know I told it at her funeral. Story I learned just a few days after she died. When in 1956, before I was around, her sister pulled up pregnant. Her sister was 19 years old, and she was pregnant out of wedlock, which in 56 was a big deal. And her mom and dad wanted her to adopt the baby out, and she said, no way. If I know Aunt Rose, it probably came with some expletives. And so she ran away. And she didn't run away to Omaha from Sioux City. She ran away to Southern California, Anaheim. And when she got there, she let the family know where she was. And Mom, this is so uncharacteristic. Mom said, I'm going to go. I'm going to be with her when she has this baby. Now, remember, this is the queen of anxiety. And I will tell you from the letter that I read, that I received after that she sent back to her folks, she was the queen of anxiety in 56 too. I mean, it was off the charts. So here she is, she's 21 years old. She's never been past Sergeant Bluff, okay, in Sioux City, just south of Sioux City. She's not traveled any place. And she's not going to get on an airplane because it's too expensive, so she buys a Greyhound ticket to go from Sioux City to Anaheim. All right, no interstates. She has to transfer, goodness only knows how many buses, and she's anxious about it all. Something told her that I'm going to be okay. I'm going to step out. Don't be afraid. But it didn't stop the fear. She stepped out. She did it. Because she knew her sister was in trouble and she knew she needed to be there. She was going to try to change somebody's life. And you know, it was just way outside of her comfort zone, but she did it. And she was afraid all the way. In fact, part of the letter, it says that the doctor that was delivering Rose's baby had to leave Rose alone for a while, take Mom down to the cafe to get her a cup of coffee so he could get Mom out of the room because she was a basket case. But you know, that's just perfect because that's Peter in a nutshell. He can see it. He can see that the seas are out there, that they're stormy, but he can see that Jesus is there with him. And he steps out, but as soon as he gets out there, he is so afraid that he starts to sink. And you could tell him till the cows come home, don't be afraid. He's still going to sink. You could tell Mom till the cows come home, don't be afraid. She stepped out. She trusted. And then Jesus was there with her to pull her up every time she felt like she was going under. My friends, that's how Jesus wants you to live your life. Don't be afraid. Those are good words of advice. But more than that, live life to the fullest. Because the anxiety will come in this fear, in this world. When you do, when you step out, when you get outside that comfort zone, the anxiety will be there, I can promise you. It's life. It's being human. Do it, Jesus says. And know that I will be with you. And know that you will never sink. Because I have you. I don't know if you noticed it or not, but when Peter said, save me, immediately it says, immediately, Jesus grabbed him, reached out his hand and grabbed him. And the same happens for you. You'll step out trusting. You'll be afraid. And immediately, he will be there to grab you. My friends, live life to the fullest. Don't be afraid to live. But when you are afraid, as you live, know that he is there. And that not only does he love you, and not only does he tell you what to do, the right thing to do, but he's there to see to it that you don't get hurt along the way. And for that we give him thanks and praise. Amen.